Welcome back, everyone. So I recently shared this post and asked you guys what you wanted me to show you with this particular image, and a few people had asked for shapes of shadows, cross hatching, and how to put that together. So that's what today's video is about. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time to offer your comment, and let's delve into this right now. So now I'm going to jump in and show you just that. So basically, before it got to this stage, like anything else, it starts with a very rough sketch. So this is probably, well, you can see by the lighter lines there, this is at least one refinement. But I did go to inks right after this refinement. Let me see if I've got enough stages of the work to show you. So it was something like that. I obviously resized the canvas so he's getting cut off. I dropped in the shapes of shadows, so pools of black. Then I start to refine that, move things around, change proportions, add some more lines, then cross hatching and rendering at that stage. So let me show you in a step-by-step approach. One of the things I like to do is add a layer, colorize it, set it to screen mode, just like that. So it's a floating layer over top of the line work. I do a two-finger tap on the line work, push that way back. And so now what happens is I'm not distracted by the artwork. And also what I find this helps me to do is to edit through the artwork because I'm not, it's not so solid in my perspective where I'm kind of stuck to it. Like that's a binding decision or something. I've got a few different brushes here. Another one of the questions that I got was what inking brush. I use a few of these, but it's the Tech pen that I like the most for the bulk of the inking. I'm going to also show you how I use some of these cross-hatching brushes to get the effects, because that was also another question. How did I get the cross-hatching so clean? So what I like to do first is start with some basic line weight. Oh, and I got to be on a layer above this layer, above the blue there, just so you can see. And so I like to start with some basic line weight, but I'll tell you, I like to start, I think it's a good idea to start really thin at this part of the work. Okay, so the reason why is it allows you to kind of design your line work in a way where you're still going to make edits to it with the shapes of shadows and the cross hatching. So you don't want the line art to be too bulky at this stage where it might adversely affect that next stage of the work. It's all about lining up your stages in a way that's conducive to a workflow that you can recreate and stay, focused on, motivated on, all those things. So let's see here. But if I keep this line nice and thin, I feel like it just makes it easier on me for that next stage of work. I really do. There's times that I will jump in and do a lot more like line rendering on the go as I'm moving through this. And I feel like sometimes, not always, I'll pay the price by almost making that mistake. Where if I do this real thin, I can develop it pretty effortlessly in the next stage. I can add the shadows, I can render it. Put it this way, another way to think about it is like this. If I got in here right now and I'm already thinking about my line weight, all right? So I'm doing these big heavy line weights everywhere. It's not a bad thing, but then what might happen is I might add my shapes of shadows in and go, oh wow, I didn't need that line weight anyways. So I think adding the line weight at the end makes the most sense, regardless, just to make sure you don't lose any of your effort. But notice I am moving the lines around just a little bit from what those blue lines were. So I'm still trying to nudge things around, develop the anatomy. There are times I will throw like two lines side by side, just, I don't know, I kind of like that style. But again, really I just need to get the basic design of the anatomy going. So, the direction of these shapes. Remember, throwing lines can generally yield you a smoother line. It does take some practice, and by throwing it, I just mean, if you were working on a shoulder and you tried to throw a sweeping line all the way around it versus a bunch of little stop and stutter steps, sometimes it's good to just do that and get a nice smooth one. So I kind of hover over the screen and do my two-finger undos as I'm maneuvering through this. Okay, let's just say that right there. Also remember with Procreate, it's really nice that you can go around as one big pull, hold it. So I didn't lift the Apple Pencil up at all. And I can get that nice little curvature there, let go. I can come up here and edit shape. an arc, and I can grab that little middle handle and adjust that, so that's pretty helpful. Okay, so now I've got the basic line weight in place. I'll do that in the chest maybe. So there we go. I've got the basic line weight in place for the arm and the chest, okay? And so the next stage of this, I want to drop in, oh, missed a spot right here, whoops. The next stage of this, I want to drop in the shapes of shadows. So let's go ahead and talk about that now. At this stage, it's really best to just duplicate this layer, turn that other one off. So if you mess up your shadows, you can go back, but I like doing it on the existing line art, and I'll show you why here in a sec, or right now actually. So as I bring this shape over, let me first explain this, because I feel like a lot of students and aspiring artists kind of wonder about this. Like, where are you putting the shadows? Why? Okay, so let's say our light source is up here pointing down, right? It's never linear, really. It's more like perspective lines than just a linear thing. But the other thing you have to think about is, how is the light radiating towards the objects, or in this case his arm, and then what's the form of each one of these areas of the arm, right? Each one of these have a little bit different, quite a bit different, series of depth and forms. I don't know, dimensions. Okay, they're all over the place, right? That's why these wrapping lines are a good idea to play around with, because they help you to perceive where these directions and these forms might actually be going. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. I'll leave my little arrow there for a light source reminder. And so now the question is, how much in shadow is this character? Well, let's say the shadow is, we'll start with this big area of the deltoid, the medial head. We'll do something like this. There we go. So that gives us a reference point. And actually, this kind of looks funny now. Let me adjust that. And also, I like to set the eraser to the same ink pen. And so what I typically do here for the shape of the shadows, I kind of have a little bit of a repetitiveness where I go up the form, down, angle it over, back down. Like, I just don't like it to be too awfully smooth. So for instance, as I work around this deltoid, it'd be real easy for me to go zip, 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 like that, right? And I just feel like a bunch of those little smiley faces aren't the right, they kind of make the anatomy look bubbly in my mind. So what I like to do is figure out a way where I can angle this stuff, and I feel like it looks more interesting. Something like that I feel like is even better than what I just had. So let me repeat that and show you what I mean. So these little bits of angles and shifts, to me, look a little bit more organic or natural, even though we're not going for any sense of kind of realism here. Obviously, we're just going for very stylized drawing, but still, there needs to be a little bit of sense of this stuff isn't too repetitive. It's not too overly smooth. I mean, it is smooth because it's muscle and anatomy, but it's not overly smooth. It's got to have a mix of soft and rigid forms, and that's where I like mixing these angles in. Yeah, I think I like that. I mean, you could stay at this one area and you could keep playing around with it. Just keep introducing small little bits of angle, subtle changes, and see what you come up with. And that's kind of how you develop part of your style right there. So continuing on with that same concept, go down here again, kind of mess around with the shifts and angles a little bit. Almost feel like maybe something like that. Tricep. Now, I'm not looking at the old artwork, so I could be making it entirely different, but I think it's a good idea for you to practice taking the same artwork and doing that anyways, like really testing yourself to draw it a couple different ways. So putting away the original version and drawing it a couple ways, and then just seeing what you come up with. I think if you're too repetitive, you're going to get you're going to lose some ideas, or you're going to not explore as many ideas, I should say. Hopefully won't lose any ideas. Like that. So you can see that by adding a fair amount of shadows to this, it's giving the the forms and the volumes a more solid feeling. That's really one of the main aspects. Now, you could also make the argument that based on the fact that we're moving downward into the illustration or the character on the page here, that he's going to receive less and less light as you get to the bottom. Let's zoom in a little bit more here. Drag and drop, gotta love that tool. So what I mean by that is you really could start doing some pretty heavy shadows to the base of the character. But I'm going to keep it pretty consistent overall. So let's say, well, let's add the shape of shadows here. So like even this part of the muscle here, let me just show you something. You could easily go just like this. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that particular muscle being shadowed that way. But I would just play around with maybe, well, what if we brought it more straight this way, then straightened it out this way, and then at the very end we just put just a tiny little thinner kind of bump there. And you can see that didn't make a very big difference, but I think that's what you have to do first. First, you have to just slowly tweak it to where you're like, oh, I'm going to try some angles here. I'm going to try to adjust something a little bit differently, mainly like to break yourself out of like a habitual state of just doing what you think looks right. That's why drawing from people that are more advanced is always a good idea, because you immediately get to see something differently than what you've been doing. So I always recommend that. Like find some amazing artwork and then sit there and ink it. Find a sheet of artwork, print it out in blue line if you can, or whatever. Just print it out in light gray, whatever you got. And just ink it where you just pay attention to the shapes of shadows. Then print it out again and just pay attention to the line weight. I mean, those types of studies are just, you're going to be glad you did them. It's just a lot of times we don't stop to think about how we can break these things down and understand them, more intimately. We just kind of glance over them and go, wow, that stuff's amazing. But if you're really not getting it, I totally recommend doing stuff like that. And then also here I'm adding some line breaks. I think that's a nice way to balance things out, because if you get these big solid shadows, you need some line breaks to soften them up. Okay, and then for the glove area, I actually went pretty simplified here. I was actually trying at first to go for something a bit better than what I ended up latching onto, but I'll just show you real quick. This is a real simplified approach to an area like this, and all I'm doing is essentially tracing out the shape of the glove, right? So I'm pretty much doing a negative of the other lines, but I don't want it to line right up because it'll look silly if, say for instance, I brought the line right to here. That's going to be distracting. So it's a negative of it, and really this isn't the best approach. What really looks good, but you got to practice it, and sometimes I nail it, sometimes I don't, is where you hit the glares on the very top edge. But you can't do it just like that. Like you can't do a circle here, circle there, circle there, circle there. It looks ridiculous. It's more well thought out than that. Something to pay attention to for that if you want to see what I mean and practice it. Look at like leather boots are a really good thing to draw, like women's leather boots. They have these cool glares and bends and folds. Now this is obviously more skin type material, but it does have a similar kind of concept of where you're trying to pick apart those glares on the highest point, where here I'm just going on the edges, which you'll see I still make this work. That's what I did for the other version, the one I showed you, but yeah, there's better ways to do it. So I'm going to get these shapes in there, drag and drop here, and then you see I got a lot of cleanup. Not a big deal, just fill that in. Again, this is a kind of a poor man's version of what you should do in this area, but it'll work. And then you can also come back with a negative line and just kind of add a few little details here and there to make it look more interesting. You could render into this, all sorts of things you can do. I'm going to leave it right there though. So now we've got, and I'm just going to do this area because you see we're already 14 minutes in the video, 15 minutes is getting lengthy. I want to hurry up and get to the rendering. I want to show you two things though real quick and then we'll wrap it up. So with the rendering, okay, so now for the rendering, and so for this, I'm really just thinking, how can I soften up this pool of a black shadow? How can I bring out the form of this shoulder? And to do that, I'm using these thick to thin lines that are again, doing both those things. They're softening up the shadow. They're going around the form of the deltoid here. And just giving a sense of value and shading, basically. So it's good to just practice making all sorts of lines, angling them in different ways. You'll see here I'm going to try some that are a bit thicker, some that are a bit thinner. And I'm also going to show you how I did the ones that were in the end piece with a custom brush. Okay, so just like that, we've got our first kind of stage of the rendering. And then I would angle the other way. I like to also make these lines a little bit different than the existing ones. So kind of starting thick and then breaking them off and going, you see across the form into the white area a bit more. Same thing, across this way. You can really angle these any way you want, but I noticed that really popular ones are 90, 45, and just multiple versions of that. You can come back right up the middle. Again, you'll see people do this and then kind of bring it off to one side. I don't know if there's any rules as it comes to this. Basically what I like to look at is if I pull back far enough, how is it blending together? Is it working? Is it helping, or is it hurting? That's ultimately what I look at. One of the things I will say is when you're doing the rendering like this is be careful not to space the lines out so much where it just, I don't know, something about it just doesn't look like rendering. It looks like just a bunch of disconnected lines. I feel like they have to be tight enough together where they start to pull together as a sense of value. So just look for that. Hopefully that makes some sense. And I think tapering them at the side of the shadow does help, or making them wider at the side of the shadow and tapered to a point away from the shadow and around the volume, around the form, seems to help. And then there's all sorts of ways you can just split it up and give it texture and just, again, experiment and have fun with it. So that's one way, and I'm not going to go and do the whole thing that way. Really, I repeat that same process. The main thing that I'm thinking about is where do I want the sense of value to stop. So I kind of imagine a line like that, a line like that, a line like that, and that's where I render to as I do it. But the way that I did it for this particular illustration is a bit different, right? If I go back to the finished illustration, the one that I showed you guys is a lot cleaner, right? Well, it's because I used, and it's the only area, but I used these, oh, sorry, I'm not on the layer apparently. I used these ones right here that are done with a custom brush. So let me show you how that's different. And I know that not everybody is into custom brushes, and some people flat out don't even like when I explain this, but that was one of the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and explain it here, because some people do like them. So now let's go ahead and, did I add that next layer? Yeah. So what I would do here is I would pick one of these cross-hatching brushes. Keep in mind this is a free set on my Gumroad, so I'll make sure the link's available in the description box below or the cards off to the side. So pick one of these. I think it was this one. Or maybe it was this one. I don't know. I've got a few of them. Let's just try them. And so what they do is they work in a couple ways. So one of which is you pull around and you can even drag, click and hold and drag like that. So you can space them out, tighten them up, whatever you want to do there. But I'll show you. So they work off a rotation as well. So basically, if you go like this and then you rotate, you could get your cross hatching like that. And you see how fast that was. Super fast. Erase here. Add a layer. Same thing. And you also want to play around with the size in which you use the brush, because that's going to give you, look, this is the main thing. You don't want to go like this, like this, like this, all at the same intensity. It's going to start looking boring. Just like even cross hatching, you have to vary it up a little bit, the lines that you generate. So just move it around like this, play around with different sizes and ways that the fade occurs against the shadow, things like that. Look for the variables. Another neat thing that you can do here is again with this eraser, I leave the same eraser in place, and I just come back and I add some negative lines. Breaks it up a bit, makes it a little more interesting. Let's go ahead and merge that one down. And I keep doing this off floating layers because I never know when I'm going to need to, well, I merge them down each time I'm done with that area, but I don't want to get caught into going over a piece of the artwork and messing something up. So yeah, just do like this. See, like this part right here, I need to fix that, so I'd probably go back with a bit of solid and blend that in. Let's add another layer. So again, you're going to rotate this based on the area you're trying to hit. Trying to see if I can get that all in one sweep there. Make that bigger, raise back this area. Okay, I could probably get this area without adding a new layer just because of the alignment. But see how you keep angling it to get that nice crisscrossing effect? Oops, went too far. I kind of like that shape. And this was all part of that brush, but I kind of like that shape it added to the back of the tricep there. I don't want it here. And then also probably a little bit right. I don't know if I like that. We'll see. Maybe, I don't know. That part kind of looks weird. But again, you can always erase it back. You just have to experiment with it, and then you'll find ways that you can introduce it into parts of the artwork. Now, really, if I wanted this to look better, I'm kind of rushing here because I want to show you, show you these things that answer the questions that were asked. But if I wanted this to look better, I could even mix in some more of those brushes. But you see, as you pull back, it starts to give that sense of a gradient, and that's all we're looking for. We just want a little bit of gradient. I don't know if I'd add anything right there. I'd probably do it just like a little bit off the back here. And you can mix in your own hand style. Now here's the other thing, because I just know somebody's gonna go, man, that's cheating. You should never do that. I get it. Everybody, there's people out there who want to see everything done by hand. Tell you what, if you're new to cross hatching and you just can't get it, that's really the purpose of me making assets and templates and brushes for people. I want to help people that just can't seem to figure it out get a sense of achievement there, but don't take away the idea that you would still practice really hard at generating your own, and you could still use these for that as well. So what I mean by that is you could very well place all your cross hatching with these, turn this to a lighter layer. Oh, actually, let me merge them all together. And you could ink over top of this, and that's going to help you, feel out that process for cross hatching. It's probably going to look better if you inked over this by hand. So keep that in mind. It's not I'm not trying to say this is the only way to do it and this is better than the traditional way. Traditional way is always the best. But this can help people that just can't seem to do as well with it, that really struggle in this department. And I feel like, certain things, overly repetitive tasks, why not? Just try to save yourself some time and use that time better invested on other parts of your work, like studying anatomy, perspective, and all the other plethora of things that go into drawing comic art. Okay, so finally what I would do is go through this and I would start to add some nice heavy line weight to really make this pop off the page, give it that sense of variation. Oh, that's really messy. Hold on. So with line weight, I've heard people explain a lot of different ways. I think the main thing is that you just go from thick to thin in different areas of the work and you see what looks good with your own. Generally thicker on the outside, thicker on the outer part of a curved area like this area, thicker on a shadow side, thicker on things that are foreshortened. All those are ideas, but just the main thing is just add lots of cool line weight around the perimeter of your work. Even just adding it to areas you want more of a focal point and an intensity to, kind of directing the viewer to certain things. All sorts of ways to use that. but I just kind of eyeball it and play around. And then finally, the last thing that I would do a piece like this, as I did with that other one, besides all the arm hair, I'm not going to get into all that, but I would just add these little wrinkles that go in the other direction, because they help to dimensionalize the forms. They make it look like there's a wrinkle in the suit, but all you're doing is you're putting a little shadow against the indentation that you would see. So for instance, as we talked about with wrapping lines, if you had wrapping lines that were going through here and this way, you kind of want to think about that. If you were to put a wrinkle right through here, you'd have it go to the higher point of the tricep, and you'd probably put a little wrinkle under it like that. You could break up this line a little bit, and then a little highlight on this side. You see how that just looks more dimensional? I mean, I don't know if I'd angle it that way, actually. Let me go back. Let's put it right here for now. Yeah, I just like these little wrinkles. They look cool. Also use some little broken up lines, kind of texturize some areas. Yeah, I feel like this line is too much. So I can break that up a little bit. But again, you're putting that shadow that's kind of dipping down into the areas of the muscle, and then a line on the top side. Yeah, I kind of love that effect. I would just really put that everywhere. It's like any other good effect. You find something, you kind of milk it a little bit. And then also look at areas where you can get rid of the lines that aren't needed. That's another thing that really makes it look more polished and professional when you're all done. Like, I didn't need these lines. It's on the light source side. It's kind of fighting the design a bit. Get it out of there. There we go. And there's an arm rendered. I mean, not fully rendered. There's areas that are missing. But that's the process. Oh, big line weight at the bottom here. Again, I would put line weight pretty heavily at the bottom. And this is the bottom and an outward bend. So I'd really put it pretty heavy there. And you can even try, sometimes it makes sense to put a negative line like this. I'm not going to do that because there's already a highlight on the side of the suit design. But if there wasn't, I would definitely do that. So yeah, so hopefully that gives you some ideas. I know that's not exactly what I worked on with the Wolverine shot. Came out a little different, but that's the way it is. It's always going to be a little different. But hopefully this gives you some ideas on how to render, how to crosshatch. Again, I'll make sure these brushes are in the link below if you want to try them out. They're free to try. Just type 0 during checkout. You can also tip and support the channel. I'm never going to say no to that. But at the same time, I'm just appreciative for anybody that supports the work and gets a copy and share it with your friends. So thanks very much for tuning in. More content on the way very soon. As always, keep drawing, keep having fun, and bye for now.